As many villains in the Marvel Universe tend to be shared amongst heroes, unlike DC comic villains who tend to mostly only go up against their designated hero, it can be difficult to untangle the shared and convoluted history of some of the more dangerous Marvel rogues. Welcome to Top 10 Nerd. I'm Andrew Boyd, and with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 being the next Marvel movie coming to theaters, we figured now would be a good time to go into the history of its villain. Today, I will be attempting to explain the High Evolutionary. He is a complicated character, so today we will just be focusing on his early life and what caused him to descend into villainy, not the specifics of his various evil plots, which we could potentially get into in a part 2. With that out of the way, let's get started with his origins. The High Evolutionary made his first appearance in 1966's Thor, number 134, but we didn't learn the finer details of his origin until the Evolutionary War event, which started in 1988's X Factor Annual number 3 and was told in backup stories across the annuals of several different Marvel comics that year, including Punisher, Web of Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men, and more. The High Evolutionary was originally a British scientist named Herbert Edgar Wyndham, who, inspired by the work of Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister, was trying to crack the code of evolution by using a machine that he'd built in his mother's basement to force rats to evolve. But though he could alter the DNA, all of his test subjects died in the experiments. He was invited to attend the 1923 International Conference on Genetics in Geneva, Switzerland, where he met an American scientist about his age named Jonathan Drew, who was studying arthropodic zoology at Yale. They became friends, but the conference was a disappointment for Herbert, as the keynote speaker advised him that his attempts to accelerate genetic material would be disastrous if he attempted it before scientists successfully managed to map the genetic code. Herbert and Jonathan got drunk together to drown their sorrows, but while Herbert was stumbling through an alley, he was approached by a mysterious figure, who we would later learn was actually the Inhuman known as Fedar in disguise. Fedar gave Herbert a package of papers which contained a blueprint for breaking the genetic code so that he could continue his research. Herbert built his machine while studying at Oxford, but was so focused on his research that he failed his classes and was expelled. He moved back into his mother's house and performed his first successful experiment, transforming his pet Dalmatian into a dog man. The creature escaped, and confused hunters shot it, causing Herbert to realize that he needed to find a place to continue his work where, quote, his subjects will be free from unthinking bumblers. He got in contact with Jonathan Drew, who had just inherited some land in the Balkans. They partnered up, and Herbert, Jonathan, his wife Miriam, and their daughter, Jessica Drew, set out to Wundagore Mountain. Life on Wundagore. While conducting their research, the two scientists discovered that the mountain was rich with uranium, which they began mining to finance their work, and the designing of an advanced lab that could fly away to space if need be. Fedar showed up again and gave Herbert a tribe of the underground creatures known as the Moloids, who would mine the uranium as well as construct the lab for Herbert. Things seemed to be going well until Jessica became sick with radiation sickness, because the two scientists apparently never thought that raising a child next to a uranium mine might be a bad idea. Herbert placed Jessica in cryostasis to slow the radiation's progression, while her father injected her with the spider extract serum that he had been working on, thinking it would allow her body to adapt to the radiation for reasons I'm not entirely clear on. Unfortunately, the serum needed time to metabolize, and Jessica Drew was left in stasis, Nora Freeze style. Her mother became distraught and left, but was mauled by a werewolf and killed. Jonathan left the lab in his grief, and Herbert set about finding the werewolf, constructing a suit of armor that could protect him from injury. He found the werewolf in his lab feeding on the Moloids and captured the wolf. Having completed the construction job, the Moloids disappeared back underground, never to be seen by Herbert again. The High Evolutionary began using his genetic accelerator to evolve animals into animal men. He would then submit them to educational programming in order to raise their intelligence. The werewolf was actually his neighbor, Baron Gregor Rusoff, who the High Evolutionary would confine on nights with a full moon in exchange for being allowed to study the Baron when he was in wolf form. Jonathan Drew showed up again, but claimed to actually be a dead mage named Magnus, who had taken the mystical Darkhold from the evil Morgan Le Fay and had been killed, but was now controlling Herbert's old partner. He warned Herbert that an evil demon named Chthon was coming to Wundagore Mountain. Herbert, being a scientist who didn't believe in magic, despite the werewolf in his basement, thought his old partner had simply lost his mind. Despite not believing Magnus, Herbert followed his advice and trained his new men to have the same moral code as the knights of old in order to help them overcome their beastly natures, and they became the Knights of Wundagore. Around this time, Magneto's runaway and pregnant wife Magda stumbled across the High Evolutionary's lab while in labor. A cow nurse named Bova was instructed to help Magda through her labor, while at the same time the demon Chthon attacked the knights. Several of them died in the effort, but the ghost of Magnus managed to defeat the demon, but not before it managed to touch the newly born Wanda Maximoff, who would grow up to be the Scarlet Witch. Magda feared that if Magneto found her, he would take the children and make them into monsters, so she walked off into the mountains, never to be seen again, and the High Evolutionary gave Wanda and her twin brother Pietro up for adoption to a nearby Romani tribe. Although, it should be noted that in the years since this story, it has been heavily retconned, so that Wanda and Pietro are not Magneto and Magda's kids, and were kidnapped from their real parents by the High Evolutionary to be experimented on, resulting in their powers. So this part isn't canon, I guess, and it also kind of makes the High Evolutionary much more villainous much earlier. So we're gonna keep going with the old version. Leaving Earth. The next part of the High Evolutionary's story comes from his first appearance in Thor number 134 and 135. In this story, Thor is looking for a missing Jane Foster, who has been transported to a random location by an alien conqueror in an effort to distract the god of thunder. Thor tracks Jane to Wundagore and is attacked by the knights, who bring him to the Evolutionary so he can decide what to do with him. Herbert is evolving a wolf, but leaves the lab to see what the deal is with the guy with the hammer. Thor demands Jane's return, and High Evolutionary is like, yeah, she just showed up one day and we've been sheltering her. Take her, I do not care. Unfortunately, Herbert forgot to turn off his machine, so the wolf evolved past the point they were aiming for and became the dreaded man-beast, a creature obsessed with destroying Herbert and any other life that he comes across. Thor helps the knights and Herbert defeat man-beast in the army of highly evolved creatures he creates, and Evolutionary sends them to a distant galaxy where they can start their own society, before taking off with his lab and Knights for Space, where he can continue his work in safety. He leaves Bova behind with Jessica, who would later grow up to be Spider-Woman, thanks to all that spider serum her dad pumped into her. The rocket ended up on an abandoned alien city, and Herbert created a bunch of animal wives for his knights and focuses on his work. While working, he discovers that the knights reverted to savagery and need to be stopped, so he has the Hulk brought to him to help defeat the knights. They succeed, but Herbert is fatally wounded in the process and has no choice but to put himself through 1,000,000 years of evolution to try and survive. He becomes a dumb-looking, floating and glowing form who can see all that ever was or could be, and devolves his knights and sends the Hulk home before taking off to see the universe. After putzing about the universe for a while, Herbert manages to reverse the evolution process so that he is only 100,000 years more evolved than most humans, and decides to create his own Earth to study, creating Counter-Earth. Man-Beast showed up again and taught the people of Counter-Earth violence, ruining the experiment. It was at this moment that Adam Warlock emerged from his cocoon, which Herbert had come into possession of, and volunteered to stop Man-Beast from ruining Counter-Earth. High Evolutionary agreed and gave Adam the Soul Gem to aid him in his quest. High Evolutionary then became a protector for the world he had created, fighting Galactus when he tried to devour Counterworld, and when Counterworld was stolen by the prime movers of Tarkus, Adam Warlock thought that the High Evolutionary had destroyed the planet and tried to kill Herbert with the Soul Gem. The trauma of this caused Herbert not to die, but to take on his godlike evolved form once more, becoming a villain. The High Evolutionary soon returned to his physical form and decided to find out what had happened to Counter-Earth. He learned that the Beyonders had taken Counter-Earth to be a part of a cosmic museum, and realizing how powerless he was in the face of such power, and not being able to deal with the fact that his life's work was being put on display by cosmic beings, like a child's crayon drawing being put on a fridge, he decided to end his own life. However, his battle armor prevented all of his attempts, so he decided to pick a fight with the Hulk so that he could break the armor open and he could die. Free of his armor, the High Evolutionary devolved himself into into a pile of goo, but his armor soon returned him to life, but the process did cure him of his depression, and he decided that he would help mankind achieve its highest potential, saying, "My encounter with the Beyonders has demonstrated to me that mankind's genetic destiny is not glorious enough. Left to our own natural path, we will never be the equal to the Beyonders. Thus, someone must guide the path of man's evolution and provide a catalyst to further our race's genetic potential. This someone, of course, must be me. I hereby assume proprietorship of man's racial destiny. Under my guidance, the human race will evolve further than the Beyonders, further than any other race of beings in existence, no matter what it takes. I shall not stop until man reigns supreme in all the universe." It was at this point that the High Evolutionary became a villain, using violent methods to attack groups who he determined were evolutionary dead ends. Well, that's all the time we have today. But if you want to hear more about the High Evolutionary and the specifics of his villainy, let us know in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more Top 10 Nerd.